Aujourd'hui, j'ai l'honneur de présenter la professeure Gerta Keller pour un titre de docteur honoris causa à l'Université de Lausanne. Gerta est actuellement professeure à l'Université de Princeton au New Jersey, aux États-Unis. La professeure Keller est une plus grande géologue actuellement active et elle est leader de son domaine. Elle est spécialisée en paléontologie et en particulier, elle étudie les effets environnementaux et biologiques des grandes catastrophes naturelles et des extinctions de masse. Ses travaux les plus influents, mais aussi les plus débattus, se concentrent sur les changements naturels qui ont mené à l'extinction des dinosaures il y a maintenant 60 millions d'années. Jusqu'à son arrivée, la communauté scientifique pensait que cette extinction était uniquement liée à l'impact d'une météorite sur le Yucatan au Mexique, mais refusant toute forme de consensus et bien sûr chercheuse de talent et d'opinion, la professeure Keller a su utiliser une approche multidisciplinaire pour montrer qu'un intense volcanisme, que nous appelons les trappes du Décan, prédatait d'environ 100 000 ans cette fameuse impact. Et elle a argumenté et démontré que ce volcanisme était probablement plus dévastateur que l'impact météorite lui-même. Alors d'une grande curiosité scientifique, évidemment d'une capacité de travail hors du commun, la professeure Keller s'intéresse à bien d'autres sujets, et par exemple aux changements climatiques qui ont mené à une grande diversification de la biodiversité et des organismes vivants, dont nous descendons d'ailleurs il y a maintenant 56 millions d'années. Alors la professeure Keller est auteure de plus de 240 articles scientifiques, de nombreux livres, elle a reçu de nombreuses distinctions, et ce aussi bien aux États-Unis qu'en Europe ou encore en Asie. Ses recherches ont inspiré de nombreux documentaires et de présentations dans les médias, mais en plus de ça, évidemment, son parcours personnel est particulièrement intéressant, car Gerta Keller est issue d'une famille de 12 enfants qui ont grandi dans les alpages d'Appenzell. Alors cette jeunesse l'a certainement marquée, elle a beaucoup voyagé, elle a fait le tour du monde, elle a finalement obtenu un bachelor à l'Université d'État de San Francisco et ensuite une thèse de doctorat à l'Université de Stanford pour finir tout simplement comme professeur à l'Université de Princeton. Il faut aussi peut-être ajouter que la professeure Keller est aussi connue pour ses opinions fortes et son originalité, lesquelles lui ont permis de briller dans une communauté scientifique qui est encore aujourd'hui dominée par une présence masculine. Alors depuis son plus jeune âge, en Appenzell, la professeure Keller a œuvré pour le droit des femmes et puis tout au long de sa carrière, elle a soutenu de nombreuses jeunes chercheuses et aussi des jeunes chercheurs, et ce, dans le monde entier. Alors la professeure Keller travaille avec beaucoup de membres de notre faculté et ces thématiques sont centrales à nos activités, notamment pour ceux et celles qui travaillent sur les extinctions de masse. Elle a été très généreuse avec des visites, des séminaires, différentes activités au sein de notre faculté et elle a publié en collaboration environ une septantaine d'articles et dont nombre d'entre eux ont été publiés dans des revues prestigieuses comme Science ou Nature. Alors pour toutes ces raisons, nous pensions qu'elle serait une candidate idéale pour cette nomination et nous nous réjouissons que ce titre lui soit remis au nom de l'Université de Lausanne. Nous la remercions également d'avoir fait le chemin, car elle est présente aujourd'hui à Lausanne, malgré un contexte compliqué pour voyager, mais nous sommes quand même très heureux de pouvoir l'accueillir. Alors sur ce, je vous invite à écouter maintenant l'interview qui a été menée par la journaliste Nathalie Randin et qui a été enregistrée hier. Merci.
So, Gerta Keller, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be able to talk to you, to know you better. You have had such an incredible life. You were raised in Switzerland. You have worked for the fashion designer Pierre Cardin when you were 17. You got shot during a bank robbery in Australia. And today you are professor of paleontology and geology in Princeton University in the USA. we're going to talk about your researches. For many years, the massive extinction of dinosaurs was explained by the impact of an asteroid, but actually you researchers have led to another explanation. Can you tell us what really killed the dinosaurs?
That's my favorite question. Of course, why did it happen? Why did the dinosaurs get wiped out? And there are only two major catastrophes that can have done it. So one is the asteroid impact that crashed into Yucatan, Mexico. And that is, of course, the most popular theory and has been almost exclusive over the last 4 decades. But the evidence does not all support that. In fact, most evidence is against it. So the second catastrophe is Deccan volcanism in India. And that is the picture behind me. And in fact, Deccan volcanism was proposed a few years before the impact theory or hypothesis at the time. But that was very much against the Alvarez hypothesis. And so they destroyed the guy who proposed it, which was Dewey McLean. I always thought that Deccan volcanism was a likely other catastrophe because of the climate warming. We know today that climate warming is looming for us. In fact, we are right in it. And we also know that we are zooming in on the sixth mass extinction. So it was quite simple.
You say it was quite simple, but just tell us, how were you able to find evidence, scientific evidence, that volcanism was the major cause of this great change?
Well, the first 20 years of the 40 years I've been in this controversy, which, by the way, is called essentially the dinosaur wars, where my small, tiny team is, of course, David versus the Goliath. But how did we find it? And how could we do it? That, too, was very simple. The first 20 years, as I started saying, were devoted to finding the evidence that supports the asteroid impact, and that could have been the real reason. And we found, instead of evidence in favor, we found so much evidence against it. And that, of course, made me the bad girl. On top of that, it was very difficult. We accumulated this kind of evidence over year after year of fieldwork and tracking down virtually every locality of impact. And then it piled up an enormous amount of evidence against the impact theory. So that left us only with Deccan volcanism. And so we started on Deccan volcanism. We couldn't do that for a long time simply because Deccan volcanism is on land, and I work on marine microfossils in order to find the evidence. And it was not until 2005 that Vincent Cortillo, a volcanologist working in the Deccan Traps for 15 years, found a locality that had actually marine fossils, microfossils.
Where was this locality?
This locality was in eastern India, a place called Rajamundry on the Bay of Bengal. And that was the first evidence that the mass extinction was in between massive lava flows that flowed 1,500 kilometers across India and out into the ocean.
Gerta Keller, explain us, has it been, how hard has it been to be a woman scientist, but also a woman scientist going against all conventional theories? Have you had a hard time?
It wasn't a cup of tea. Yes, it was a hard time. And it was literally a war. But I had my small team, mostly thanks my oldest collaborator from the University of Lausanne, in fact. I will come to that later on. But the war is still going on, even though we have accumulated so much evidence also from the Deccan volcanism. But essentially, we survived on camaraderie, humor, and hard work, and pursued the truth. We wanted the truth to be known.
Can you tell us how can we explain that your very strong interest, your passion for this particular period of life on Earth, the Cretaceous, 60 million years ago? How did this passion arrive in your life?
Well, first of all, it's curiosity. But secondly, it's really the climate warming that has begun over decades, many decades ago, even before the 1980s. But it was really the 1980s that it was first determined that we were on a very dangerous path with climate warming. And I thought that's about when I started with Deccan volcanism and the mass extinction. And that was because it seemed so likely that climate warming could have been the problem at that time. And that would have been due to Deccan volcanism. And so the looming crisis that we had, in fact, I interpreted that we would be the next dinosaurs on the way to extinction. And we could find out, read from the past, like we read a good book, read from the rocks in the past, what really happened. And maybe we can find out just how we might save ourselves a little better than the dinosaurs did.
Two more questions, Gerta Keller, for this interview. I would like you to talk about your common research with University of Lausanne. Can you just tell us one striking memory of the work you have developed with researchers of University of Lausanne?
Well, the research with workers at Lausanne, which include Thierry Haddad, my longest 30-year collaborators, but also Jorge Spangenberg and former Carl Fermi, and many, many PhD students and master students who have helped us throughout the decades. And we've gone through it together. We've really suffered through the attacks from the opposition, and we have enjoyed the wins, however rare they came or were acknowledged. And there isn't really one, but certainly the last 10 years were the highlights, because this is when we had one success after another while bringing Deccan volcanism to the public and to the science. less to some public acknowledgement still, but certainly a lot of acknowledgement among scientists.
Now, my last question is about women, because you have always been a feminist activist. Today, this year, the University of Lausanne celebrates 3 women, according to Dr. HONORIS CAUSA, for their academic accomplishments. Do you think things are changing for women?
Yes, if the University of Lausanne is an example of it, it certainly is. In my knowledge, this is history making for having acknowledged 3 academic women in one pile. I think this is a first, and it's an enormous advantage and honor and step forward to have the University of Lausanne have done that. It's really quite incredible. Secondly, yes, there is some slight progress elsewhere, but it's at a very, very slow pace. I can give you an example of myself in Princeton. I was the first woman hired with tenure. And it's 37 years later, and we're only 2 in the department. Only in the last couple of years has there been real discussion of how to increase women in earth sciences. And I mean, not just Princeton, that's across the field, in the US at least. I do not know how it is in Europe overall, but my guess is women are still very rare there too. It's the step forward that has been discussed is really cluster hiring. Hire 3-4 women at the same time so that they actually have a cohort where they can communicate with each other and feel more safe and secure in the men's world of science or any other academic field. It's unclear whether this will work because you need more. It's a competitive area to become tenured. And it will be very much dependent on how well senior faculty are mentoring these young hires. So that's basically where we stand today. Can we really make a success?
Thank you very much, Gerta KELLER. Thank you for sharing this moment with us. Thank you for being with us from Princeton University, and congratulations for your award.